you.
Hello, hello.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I am as I was mentioning to my followers and those viewing already, I've been a longtime fan of yours, following your work, and had an opportunity to get a peek at your book, How Far You Have Come. I had to look at it on PDF, Morgan, because your publisher sent me a copy, and I don't get to hold it up. I wanted to
Oh,
hold it up next to my book, Morgan, because your book, How Far You Have Come, and your first book, and my book, Growing Slow, they could all be cousins or sisters or
oh.
something. This is all about slow growth, and this is
Yes, I
growing
love
slow.
the title.
Thank you, Morgan.
Oh
So
my
we're
goodness.
here in Growing Slow Conversations, and I was introducing everyone to you, Morgan. And just so that you know, a Growing Slow Conversation is this. We get together with authors, thought leaders, experts in various areas because culture says go big or go home.
Yeah.
Culture says grow fast. But Morgan knows a different way, and she speaks about it quite often through her words and her art. So tell me, what does growing slow look like for you? I see it all the time out in your art, and I was so excited to hear what you have to say about what it looks like to grow slow and why is that important?
Oh, well, thank you for saying that. I mean, growing slow has been huge in my life for sure. I started out in my early on in my life feeling like I was moving slower than everyone else, and something that I've been open about sharing more and more lately is that I was recently diagnosed with autism, and I ended up finding out that a lot of the things that made me feel like I was slower than everyone else and I couldn't keep up with everybody else. Like there was actually an answer for that. And I still struggle but because of knowing that, but not knowing all those years and dealing with this nonstop just constant like trying to figure out like what is wrong with me, like why do I feel so slow in comparison to everyone else. It also encouraged me to be more creative and slowly but surely learn how to embrace who I was. So yeah, that's a huge part of my story. And then writing this new book, I started writing this book right at the beginning of the first lockdown, and that was just so uncertain because I was just like, how do you write a book about the future when no one knows like how to plan for the next week or two? So I was like, well, I guess I can look back. And I was able to look back in my life and see all these moments where I had really been growing in courage, even though they just felt like I was just moving through life, going through the motions. So, yes, I love to embrace the slow growth. It's often hard to remember that in real time, but I'm definitely learning to embrace that so much in my life.
There was a page, Morgan, in your book, and I typed it out again. I don't have her book here in front of me, but I was able to see a PDF. But I absolutely loved this page and these words. Your desire to go beyond the limits, to get there faster, but moving at a careful pace requires courage in this race, as if to say, time does not define me. I do not answer to the tick of the clock and will not give in to its alluring tongue. In my own speed, with my own limits, I am still becoming. I love it when a woman, when a human being embraces the process of becoming. I think that we were supposed to have arrived on planet Earth, having matured in every way, when
Yeah.
for whatever reason we were sent to Earth as babies and we learn and grow over time.
Hmm.
So how did you get to this place of embracing the concept of becoming and allowing yourself to enter into that space?
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's one of my favorite words, and it's definitely something that I have sat with a lot. And one day I looked up the word becoming because I'm just so obsessed with words and definitions. And I'm like, what's just like the textbook definition of becoming? And one of the main like Oxford English definitions of becoming, I have it right here, the process of coming to be something or of passing into a state. And I find that so fascinating because I associate this word becoming with like fully blooming into who I'm supposed to be. But becoming is really just the process of coming into, of just going from one place to another. So even from moving from the year 2020 to the year 2021, like that is the process of becoming. Even like the process of, I mean, I'm 31, and at this point I've lived in 5 different states. And even that alone, like even if I lived in all 5 of those states and I didn't do anything interesting and I didn't accomplish anything, just the physical movement, the physical process of traveling mile by mile, it's like, wow, that's a part of my becoming too. So yeah, I've just been trying to embrace that more because, like many people, this past year I ended up achieving less than I thought I would. You know, I had some big plans for 2020. That was the year I turned 30, right at the beginning, and I was just like, yeah, this is the decade. I'm going to do all this stuff, and yeah. None of that happened. So I had to really learn how to look at that in a different way and learn how to see that process of becoming. It's like passing through from one stage to another, and that alone is beautiful.
Yes, you know, reading your book as you're passing through literal states and literal changing lands and landscaped. What I loved about, well, I loved a lot of things about your book,
Thank
but one
you.
thing I know that we have in common is we both looked to nature as a beautiful metaphor for what it looks like to live a life fully into the becoming of who we are as people. Morgan, I come to you from a 5th-generation family farm where we are planting corn and soybeans, and we're growing pigs, and I'm growing words. And so my book, Growing Slow, is really uses seasons in a growing season and talking
Mm.
about seeds and growth and harvest. And you too, you speak so beautifully of seeds and harvest and blooming and becoming. I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, I think that often culturally the expectation is the growth that we can see upward above
Mhm.
soil. But there's
Yeah,
another kind of growth that is so important.
yeah.
And I want to read some words again from your book, How Far You Have Come. May we never forget the growth that has happened underground. May we never forget the strength and courage we have found. Tell me what it looks like in your life to live that kind of deep rooted life.
Oh wow. Yeah, I love that you brought up the generations and with your family and stuff, because that's really important to me. And oh, I could talk about this forever, but I'll just pick one story because I just love that so much. But a few years ago, I had an experience where I didn't know a lot about my ancestry, and I got to learn about my ancestry and ended up getting the name, birthplace, date of death of my great great grandfather, who was born a slave and died free. And that was just such just like a sobering moment, because it was like, wow, I'm so glad to have his name and I'm so glad to know more about him. But at the same time, like just thinking about the struggles that he lived through. I'm glad that he was able to die free, but it was still just like this heaviness that came with that, of like just trying to like wrap my mind around what my own ancestors have lived through just so I could exist. And that for me is just something I think about a lot. Like, I'm not even trying to consciously, but there are many times where I'm just going throughout my day and I'm just like, wow, I wonder what my ancestors would have thought of this. Like, I wonder how they would feel seeing me live in this moment. So for me, it's like, I can't see that. I didn't get to walk this earth with them. I didn't get to have those conversations, but I know like literally their DNA is a part of who I am, and I carry that with me. And you can see it in the sense that, okay, yeah, how I look, okay, yeah, that comes from the generations before me, but I can't really like see it in the way that I see people every day. So it's just this really interesting, mysterious thing of just like, wow, we don't even know the full gravity of all that it took for us to exist. And as uncertain as that is, it's also just a beautiful mystery that we can just reflect on and spend time with. So yeah, I could talk about that forever. So
That's
I
so
hope
cool.
I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I was talking about this idea of deep-rooted growth, and you even take it further, like down generations. And I think that so often when we think about what we're growing in our lives, we're thinking about this generation and who
Mhm.
we are and what we can produce and what the outputs are. But there's something really valuable to taking time to thinking about what are we growing underneath? Like
Yeah.
when somebody is exploring Morgan, like who was my great great grandma, and they come across Morgan's story, what is the story
Mm.
that you want them to know about Morgan, about the deep rooted woman that you are?
Oh, wow. Man, I don't, I'm like, I don't know. Um,
It's a big question
because
because
like
it's this question of
I love
legacy.
that. It's so funny. I did a poll on Twitter a few months ago, and I was like, who thinks about, their legacy on like a
Right.
daily basis? And it was not a large percentage. I'm like, yeah, I'm a part of that group of like, yeah, for whatever reason, I'm just like, what kind of legacy am I gonna leave? So I do think about that. But for some reason, the first thing that came to mind when you were asking that question is very visual. I thought of a tree, and I thought about, I love looking at trees. And so oftentimes, the trees that catch my attention the most are usually trees that are like 100 years old, or even just looking at photos of them, like they're just so beautiful and majestic. And it's so fascinating to me because it's like, wow, the person who planted that tree never got to even live to see it in its full capacity. It's like they just had the faith that sowing the seed of that tree, it was going to matter in future generations. And it did. And here I am looking at it, and they didn't know me and I didn't know them. And like I've been on like Wikipedia rabbit holes, like looking up like 500-year-old trees. And I'm like, these trees have like, they've seen like wars and stuff. Like this is just wild to think that one person made sowed this seed, and now it's here all these years later. So I think for me, I just hope that a future generation would look back and see it's like, wow, she was sowing seeds. Like she
Yes.
didn't know what this thing would become. She didn't know how this would be perceived, decades and decades later, but she was sowing seeds, and she was doing that faithfully. And I can see that. So yeah, I think that to me is what keeps me going. And because I tend to overthink it, I'm just like, does this little thing matter? Like, does this matter in the big picture? It's like, Morgan, just keep sowing seeds. Like, stop worrying about how it's all going to flourish right away.
That's right. Well, you are putting down roots, and I say roots. Most people say roots. I'm sorry about that. It's an
I love
Iowa thing.
it.
But you are putting down roots in a legacy of beauty, and we're so grateful for that. And
Thank you.
speaking of flourishing and fruitfulness, my goodness, friend, almost 2 million followers on Instagram right now. I mean, applause and kudos to you. And that, I think what happens though, when it comes to growth, when we look at somebody with 2 million followers, we think, oh, well, good for her. She probably went viral or she's an overnight sensation. But there's a lot of work and stuff sitting behind all that, years of
Yeah.
creativity, and a lot of things probably done as a seed yourself planted in a dark place. Can you tell us about that? What has growth looked like even in your platform and your creativity?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I love that question. Growth for me has just looked a lot like paying attention to what other people are saying, how they're growing in their lives, and how that connects with me and how I'm growing. And I found a lot of growth starting to happen when I would share things and I would encourage people, especially early on. I was like, yeah, you're free to share my art. Like I actually remember very early on, like seeing there were some college students who actually took my Instagram stories and they printed them off and put them on their dorm room wall. And I was like, that's so cool. I mean, I was not upset about it at all. I was just like, yeah, use this however you want. Like if this means something to you, take it as your own. If I put it out there, that's permission for you to take it as your own. And I just started to see that. I'm like, wow, art and words are just such a way of helping other people find language for their own growth. And I just want people to know that I'm the kind of person that, for whatever reason, like I just want to share it. I like to put it out there and I want to share it. And generosity is a huge, I mean, it's a spiritual practice for me. It really is, because I get stuck in the whole like, do I have enough to give? Like, Am
Mm.
I smart enough? Am I good enough? Am I witty enough? Am I cool enough? Like I used to be like a, what I thought was like a young hip millennial, but like now millennials are old now. And I'm like, am I too lame? Am I not relevant? So being generous and offering people, hey, you can share this if you want. You can make this your own, wallpaper, even if you want to. That has just been such a way of like, okay, Morgan, like even if it's something small that ultimately doesn't change the world, a graphic or a poem, like it matters that you're putting it out there and you're inviting other people to be a part of that. So yeah, I just try to stay generous. And it's not easy for me. Like I'm not, I wouldn't, I'm, I mean, I feel like I'm a naturally kind person, but just like an overwhelming sense of generosity doesn't come very naturally to me just because of insecurity. But through sharing, I've learned more and more of like, wow, there's so much growth that comes from just practicing being generous. So I think that's been a huge part of the growth is I try to keep that at the center of it. I have I have an online shop, but I always try to keep things for free also. Like I'm like I have free art on my blog. If you want to download it and do whatever you want with it, you can do that. So yeah, that's how I practice and I'm grateful to see how that grows.
Oh,
So
that's so great. So, those of you who are joining, if you don't have her book yet, that would be a way to support Morgan with all the stuff that she does. I mean, it's okay for her to get paid for her amazing work. So, you can check out her new book, How Far You Have Come. And I've asked her to come on here because I have my book too, which is
yeah.
Growing Slow. And I was saying earlier that Growing Slow and Morgan's work could kind of be good buddies or cousins or something because we both are promoting this idea of slow growth. And so a couple last questions for you, Morgan. And one of them was the fact that my book is about unhurrying your heart because a
Mm.
lot of us have hurried hearts. Can you give us some tips from your life on what it looks like to unhurry your heart if you start to feel kind of ramped up and anxious about something?
Yes. So, the first thing it's kind of, it may sound cliche, but it's super important in my life, and that's just spending time in nature. But not forcing myself to like go do something eventful or to go do something like beyond that is Instagrammable. It's like literally just standing outside. And if you have the privilege to breathe fresh air, like that is something that is so needed. And yeah, so often overlooked. So there's so many times where I'll even just go outside and I'm just standing in the sun and I'm like, wait, this is what I needed. Like vitamin D. I thought I needed all the answers for everything, but I actually just needed some sunlight. So or a nap. And that leads to the next thing is take as many naps as you can. I have a toddler and I'm learning more and more of like, yeah, I'm gonna take a nap when he takes a nap because I need one too because sometimes my tendency is when he's taking a nap, I'm like, okay, I need to go work even more. I got so much stuff to get done. But one of the things I have to get done is rest. So, like, for instance, today, my son, for whatever reason, woke up at 2 a.m., like just ready to party. So when he took a nap today, I took one too. And yeah, I had stuff to do, but I was like, rest is a part of what I need to do. And I'm going to take this extra moment to rest, even though I'm actively thinking of other things that I want to do. And the third thing I would say is just stay in communication with the people in your life. Like,
Mm,
I would say over this past year, like many other people, my community got really small. And like one of the main people I was seeing for a long time was my sister,
yeah.
who also has a toddler. And we talk all the time. And it's like, okay, yeah, maybe in theory, oh, I wish I had more people around. I wish we were doing more things. But it's like, the to have one person is a gift.
That's right.
I get a lot. I've seen like over the years, like getting questions about people saying like, "Oh, I wish I had friends. I wish I had community," and I'm like, "Me too." But it doesn't have to be plural. Like sometimes just having one person, your cousin, your sibling, your roommate that you can just safely talk to, that's a gift, even as you wait for that community to grow. And I think that's going to be really important right now, because a lot of us have just seen our relationships change so much over the past year. So yeah,
That's
those
so
are just
true.
few things I've been holding on to.
I love it. And then my last question, hopefully your team got this one to you because I don't want to take you off guard here. But in the
Oh,
Growing Slow book, I have this Growing Slow method, and it's based on 3 R's: remember, reflect, and return. And this is a daily practice for me. It was a practice before it was in the book, but I remember something that I've learned in the past week, some wisdom that I've taken to heart, or it even can be like a photo I took, or some random memory of grandma that came to mind. And then I reflect on that. Like, what does that mean for me today? How is that hitting me in the
mm,
heart and the soul right now? And then I
yeah.
return. I return to the land that is my life, whether that is somewhere in Arizona or for me, farmland in Northwest Iowa. And I think about, what does this wisdom mean carrying forward into my life in the coming week, in the coming season, whatever that happens to be. And so, Morgan, I would love it if you would give us something that you've been remembering lately, if you'd reflect on that just a little bit. And then as you return to the land that is your life, what does that look like going ahead?
Yes, I love that so much. Yes. What I have been remembering is so funny, because it's like, okay, Morgan, here's your book plug, but it really is what I've been remembering. But just remembering how far I've come, just especially over the past year. I have really been looking at maps a lot, and just remembering physical journeys that I've taken. And even if I can't like find meaning in them right away, then that's okay. Like, just remember it. I was reading something today about how, like, when we go to sleep at night, like our brain just kind of like, I mean, I'm not a neurosurgeon, so I'm definitely paraphrasing, but our brains just kind of like dump most of what happened that day, and we just forget it forever. So I was just like, man, like there's just so much we don't remember. So I'm
Yeah.
like, I have to be mindful about actually remembering the journeys I've taken. And in terms of, I'm hoping I don't get them mixed up. Reflect is next,
That's
right?
right. Reflect is
Yes,
next.
in
Yes.
terms of what I'm reflecting on is in that kind of remembering state. When I get to, I would say, the more uncomfortable parts of things that I'm remembering, it's like, wow, why do I just want to skip over that whole chapter of my life? Why do I not want to go there? And I have several of those chapters in my book of like, oh, I'm barely writing about this. Like, I'm barely putting this on the page. But what's happening, that word reflect, makes me think of a mirror. And it's sometimes hard to face ourselves in the mirror for who
Oof.
we really are. So it's just a matter of asking those questions, oftentimes with my therapist. But like, why am I struggling looking at this, and what does that mean? Is some,
Return. Oh, yeah.
yeah, just
Sorry.
yes, yeah. And that brings me to
I'm
return.
sorry. I didn't mean to hop on you.
Oh no, you're doing great. No, I love it. I love it. And yes, and just to return to that state of like, of grace, honestly, of like, okay, even when you do remember and start reflecting on those uncomfortable things, like, you can gracefully work through this. You don't have to rush through everything you're going through and figure it all out right now. It's like, our brains are really clever at trying to do that. And it's great when we're trying to solve a math problem, but we're not a math problem. And we can take time. Like, we're not sitting in a room on a standardized test, like you got to finish it in in the next hour. It's going to feel that way, but no, life doesn't work that way. So yeah, just returning to the grace that reminds me that it's okay to move through that slowly.
If you want another awesome video in our Black Excellence series, check out the video right there next to me. I think you'll enjoy it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.